You are in the middle of a routine traffic stop. The vehicle has already pulled over, the engine is off, and the moment feels still, but tense. You reach for your phone. You turn on the camera. Not to provoke, not to escalate, but to document what is happening around you in real time. As soon as the device is visible, the officer approaches. There is a pause, a glance at your hands, then at the phone. The tone changes slightly. The words come quickly. Turn that camera off, right now. In that moment, most people hesitate. Some people comply immediately, some argue, some panic. And many people never realize that what they do in the next few seconds can shape everything that follows, including how the encounter is recorded, interpreted, or remembered later. This is not about encouraging conflict. This is about understanding how communication, rights, and behavior interact during a stressful situation where authority is present and emotions are high. When someone is told to stop recording, the first instinct is often uncertainty. Is that a lawful order? Is it just a request? Is it something you are required to obey immediately, or something you can question calmly? To understand this properly, you have to step away from panic and focus on clarity. In many democratic legal systems, especially under constitutional frameworks that protect speech and expression, recording public officials performing public duties in public spaces has been widely recognized in court interpretations as a protected activity. However, the exact boundaries can vary depending on location, circumstances, and whether the recording interferes with official duties. The key principle that repeatedly appears in legal discussions is this: documentation of public activity is not automatically a crime, but behavior during that documentation matters. Positioning, interference, and escalation can change how an encounter is viewed. So when the officer says to turn off the camera, there are typically 4 types of situations that may follow. Each one sounds different, each one feels different, and each one requires a calm, measured response. The first situation is when the officer claims that recording is not allowed at all. The officer may say something like, "You are not allowed to record this stop," or "It is illegal to film law enforcement." This is said with confidence in many cases, and that confidence alone can influence how a person reacts. But confidence is not the same as legal accuracy. In general legal interpretation across many jurisdictions, recording in public spaces is not automatically treated as a criminal act. Courts in several regions have recognized that public oversight of public officials is part of democratic transparency. However, this does not mean recording is unlimited or that it overrides all instructions in every situation. The important distinction is this: recording itself is usually not the issue. Interference is. So if you are in this situation, the safest and most stable approach is not to argue, not to raise your voice, and not to turn the encounter into a confrontation. The goal is to remain calm while making your position clear in a respectful way. A simple, steady response can be, "I am recording from a safe distance. I am not interfering with your work." Then pause. Do not repeat it rapidly. Do not escalate tone. Let the moment settle. The reason this matters is because communication tone often influences how the situation develops more than the words alone. The second situation is when the officer escalates and introduces the possibility of arrest or detention. This is where pressure increases. The officer may say that if you continue recording, you could be arrested for obstruction or non-compliance. At this point, the emotional pressure can become significant. Many people instinctively stop recording to avoid conflict. Others become defensive and argue. But escalation requires even more calm, not less. Obstruction laws in general legal systems are usually tied to actions that physically or actively interfere with official duties. Simply observing or recording from a lawful distance is often treated differently from blocking movement, refusing lawful instructions, or interfering with safety procedures. However, perception matters in real time. That is why your behavior should remain controlled and non-confrontational. A calm response in this situation can be, "I am not interfering. I am standing at a safe distance and recording." If the situation continues to escalate and physical detention begins, the priority shifts from argument to safety. Compliance with physical instructions is often advised in many legal systems to avoid further escalation or harm, while legal challenges are handled later through formal processes. If you are placed under arrest or detained, statements should remain minimal, calm, and factual. For example, "I am complying. I do not consent to searches. I would like to speak with an attorney." These kinds of statements are not about winning an argument in the moment. They are about clearly marking your position for later review in an official context, where facts and recordings can be evaluated properly. The third situation involves department rules or internal policy. Sometimes an officer may not rely on legal claims, but instead refer to internal guidelines. They might say something like, "Our department policy does not allow recording during stops." This can sound official, it can sound final, but internal policies are not the same as national or constitutional law. Policies guide behavior within an organization, but they do not automatically override broader legal protections or public rights frameworks. However, again, the most important thing in the moment is not to turn this into a debate. The roadside is not a courtroom. It is not the place where legal interpretation is settled. A calm and respectful response might be, "I understand you are referring to policy. I am recording from a safe distance and not interfering." If you want clarity without escalation, you can also ask a neutral question. Am I being given a lawful order, or is this a departmental request? This type of question does something important. It shifts the conversation from emotional pressure to clarity. It also encourages the officer to define the nature of the instruction more precisely, but it must always be asked calmly. Tone can completely change how it is received. The fourth situation is when safety concerns are introduced. This is one of the most common justifications given in tense encounters. The officer may say that they cannot see your hands clearly, or that the phone could be mistaken for something dangerous, or that recording is creating a distraction. Safety concerns are always taken seriously in any lawful system, because officer safety and public safety are both important considerations. However, safety concerns must also be balanced with reasonable behavior and observable facts. If your hands are visible, if you are stationary, and if you are not moving toward the officer, then the situation is typically very different from one involving unpredictable or aggressive movement. In this situation, the best response is not legal argument, but visible compliance with safe behavior. You can calmly say, "My hands are visible, I am not moving, I am recording from a safe position," and then reinforce your behavior with actions. Keep your hands where they can be seen. Avoid sudden movement. Keep distance. Do not approach. If you are in a vehicle, keeping your hands visible on the steering wheel is often a simple way to reduce tension and avoid misunderstandings. At the same time, narrating calmly can sometimes help create clarity about your actions, not as a performance, but as a record of behavior. "My hands are on the wheel. I am not reaching for anything. I am remaining still." This kind of narration is not about confrontation. It is about reducing ambiguity in a moment where misunderstanding can escalate quickly. Across all four situations, there is one underlying principle that matters more than anything else. Control the tone, control the movement. Do not escalate emotionally. Even when you believe you are right, even when you believe the instruction is incorrect, the roadside is not a place for winning arguments. It is a place for maintaining safety and clarity. There are also several commonly discussed personal phrases that people use to establish boundaries during interactions with authority figures. These phrases are not magical protections, and they do not guarantee outcomes, but they are often used to communicate clearly and avoid confusion. One commonly used question is, "Am I free to leave?" This is used to clarify whether a situation is voluntary or whether you are being detained. Asking it calmly can help establish the nature of the interaction. Another commonly used statement is, "I am choosing to remain silent." This is sometimes used to avoid misunderstanding during questioning. The important part is clarity. Silence alone can be misinterpreted, but a clear statement helps define intent. Another statement often used is, "I do not consent to any searches." This is a way of clearly communicating boundaries. It does not prevent lawful procedures where applicable, but it establishes your position for the record. And another is, "I would like to speak with an attorney." This is used to request legal support and to ensure that any questioning pauses until appropriate representation is available, depending on the legal framework in place. Again, these phrases are not about confrontation, they are about clarity. What is often misunderstood in public discussions about recording or interacting with law enforcement is the assumption that the situation is purely about rights alone. In reality, it is about the interaction between rights, perception, communication, and behavior under stress. An officer is also operating in a high-pressure environment where decisions are made quickly. A civilian is also operating under stress, often uncertain about what is happening. When both sides are stressed, misunderstandings can escalate rapidly. That is why the most important skill in these situations is not argument. It is composure, slow movements, clear words, respectful tone, safe distance, visible hands, calm breathing. These are not legal strategies. They are human strategies for reducing risk in tense moments. And there is another important reality to understand. Even when rights exist, enforcement and interpretation often happen later in formal processes, not in the moment. Courts, reviews, complaints, and official recordings are where disagreements are ultimately evaluated. The roadside encounter itself is not the final decision point. So trying to resolve everything in real time through argument is rarely effective. The most stable approach is to focus on behavior that keeps you safe, keeps the situation calm, and preserves your ability to address concerns later through appropriate channels if needed. In summary, recording in public spaces, especially during interactions with public officials, is widely discussed and often recognized within legal systems, but it is not a license for confrontation or escalation. The safest and most effective approach is calm documentation, respectful communication, and controlled behavior. Understanding this balance can make a difficult situation less confusing and reduce unnecessary tension. And above all, the key principle remains consistent throughout every scenario. Stay calm, stay clear, stay safe.